It seems like every day we see headlines about some public company behaving badly. Whether it is environmental disasters, abusive workers, or just plain theft, companies often don't have an overarching mission to do good. This shouldn't be a surprise because the main job description for the CEO of a public company is to maximize shareholder profits. But there's a different way, B Corps. So stay tuned to find out more. Hey everybody, welcome back to another Future Tech video podcast. Today we are talking about a topic I have wanted to discuss on here for a long time, B Corps or benefit corporations. In 2010, Maryland became the first U.S. state to pass benefit corporation legislation, and to date, 38 states, including the District of Columbia, have followed suit. And today, there are many prominent companies like Patagonia, Athleta, Allbirds, and Ben Jerry's that are all B Corps. Now, I first learned of B Corps from the social media postings of Tim Frick, an early proponent of B corporations here in Illinois. Tim is a co-founder of B Local Illinois, and Tim's company, Mighty Bites, is celebrating 10 years of being a B Corp. So Tim is here to fill us in on why they are important and how they work. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. I've been wanting to have this conversation for a long time because I think the idea behind B Corps is really, really quite fascinating. And I think it's an overdue concept for sure, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But before we get there, I would just like to hear a little bit about you, Mighty Bites, and how you came to start B Local Illinois.
So I started my digital agency, Mighty Bites, which is both a certified B Corp and a public benefit corporation, which we're going to talk about.
Okay.
Because there's a difference between the two. I started the company in 1998, and at the time, it was early internet heyday. I was seeing lots of companies being funded for lots of silly reasons and silly ideas, and lots of, kind of purpose-driven organizations and nonprofits and smaller organizations that had a really good core mission, but that were kind of being left out of that kind of early mad dash to digital transformation, that was happening and as the internet rose to power in the 90s. And so I wanted to help those organizations, and I wanted to help companies and organizations that had kind of purpose at their heart. And so I started the agency to try and do that and help them find success using the internet. Of course, that was a while ago, and the internet has evolved a lot since then. And so what we do for our clients, well, it may have started doing flash animations and things like that. We've really evolved to help them in different ways over the years that we've been in business.
So you came to start B Local Illinois, and now I understand B Local is a broader national organization, and maybe even international, I'm not sure, but can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
B Corps or B Corp B Lab is the organization that certifies B Corp. So a B Corp is a kind of company that kind of monitors purpose and profit alongside one another and balances the two. And so, certified B Corps adhere to the highest verified third-party standards for, accountability, transparency, environmental and social performance, that kind of thing. So B Lab is the kind of governing organization that runs that. And they certify B Corps. They also started the benefit corporation legislation that you talked about in the intro. Spinning out from that, essentially, is our B Local groups. There's a bunch of different affinity groups within the B Corp community. There's the B Corp Climate Collective. There's We the Change, which is focused on women's issues. There's a number of these different things, but one of those is the B Local groups. And so there are currently, I believe, 25 B Local groups in the US and Canada, with more sprouting up around the world because B Lab is a global organization. And what B Local groups are is they're place-based organizations or collections of B Corps getting together to create collective action. And so when Mighty Bites became a certified B Corp in 2011, we were number 9 in the state. And we happened to know a couple of the others, and we got together with them and said, hey, we want to meet others in Illinois that are interested in using business for good. And so the easiest way to do that was to start throwing happy hours. And so we put together in the middle of our very first one. I remember it was February of 2012, and it was in the middle of one of Chicago's famous crazy winter snowstorms. And yet we still had 25 people or so come out that night because they really wanted to learn about B Corps and wanted to find out who else was focusing on using business for good and such. So we ended up from there. It just kind of this snowball, for lack of a better term, given that it was February. This whole thing kind of just kept moving, and the event started getting bigger, and we started building a pretty decent following. And now, almost 10 years later, it's the B Local Illinois has a board and advisory committee and board chairs that are focused on all kinds of different things. So, like I said, we are one of 23 to 24, 25 B Local organizations in the US and Canada, specifically focusing on helping people use business for good in Illinois. And we also collaborate. There's a B Local Minnesota, there's a B Local Michigan, there's a B Local Wisconsin. So we collaborate regionally as well to help organizations, share resources and provide networking referrals and best practices and that kind of thing.
When I talk to people about B Corps and, they're like, I wish my company could do this. And I'm like, well, have you ever heard of B Corps? And nobody's ever heard of B Corps, unfortunately. Yeah. So could you kind of give a breakdown of like what it is? And you made a distinction between B corporations and benefit
corporations,
benefit corporations, and I'm actually, I must have been, I'm a little unfamiliar. I thought they were kind of one and the same. What makes that distinction?
Right. Well, and I think to your point that it's a complicated story to tell. Mm-hmm. And that could be part of why the whole world doesn't know about this. But when you look at things like Elizabeth Warren's, her Accountable Capitalism Act,
mm-hmm.
Essentially reading through that, that's kind of what B Corps are. It's really about accountability and transparency and social and environmental performance. And as you mentioned in your intro, the law of the land in the U.S. is to maximize shareholder value. And that leads us to all kinds of different problems and all kinds of issues and companies behaving badly.
Yeah.
And so this is meant to be kind of an alternative to that. And that's really focused on meeting stakeholder needs, not just shareholder needs. So employees, the environment, communities, customers, et cetera. And so there's two flavors, as I mentioned. The benefit corporation is a legal designation like an S Corp or a C Corp. Okay. The certification or a certified B Corp is a rigorous assessment that you go through. So Mighty Bites is both. In 2011, we became a certified B Corp, and we went through the assessment for the first time and answered all these crazy, rigorous questions about how we run the company. And you have to get a baseline of 80 points in order to become certified. And I think we were at like 84 when we first certified. And then in 2013, Illinois passed benefit corporation legislation. And what that is, we're an S Corp. And so it's a layer of legislation that sits atop our S Corp status that basically allows us to claim a public benefit alongside the law of the land of pursuing profit. So we put the two in tandem with one another. You can create, as a benefit corporation, you can claim a very specific public benefit, like say your company wants to end poverty or end hunger or something like that, or you can claim a general public benefit. And that's what we went with, as we just decided we wanted to be a benefit-driven company, and that all of the work that we do is driven by some sort of mission, and that mission is the B Corp mission. And so we took our assessment, and that's the third-party validation of our benefit, our public benefit. And so that's kind of the difference between the two. Okay. And again, I think that might be part of why people, it's a complicated story to tell, and might be part of why people would just hear B Corps and they're like, I don't really know what that is or what that means. So it might be, why the story isn't getting told more broadly. Although it's, the problems that COVID has brought on above and beyond personal physical health, there's obviously a whole number of ripple effects of COVID. And one of them was just, this kind of way of thinking of long-termism and thinking about stakeholders alongside, the pursuit of profit makes companies more resilient. And so B Corps had a less difficult time as COVID hit the world and the economic downturn happened and stuff. And most B Corps jumped in and rolled their sleeves up and said, how can we help? How can we, our business model is based on long-term positive social and environmental impact, which makes us more resilient. And so how can we partner with other B Corps? How can we help other people who are not necessarily doing as well as we might be doing?
the narrative we keep hearing in public, really lends itself to the adoption of B Corps here. What are the benefits for companies for being a B Corp, right? I mean, like, why would a company choose? Because from what I understand, you can be like a C Corp and then just designate yourself as a B Corp and kind of just keep moving along. What would inspire? What are the benefits a company would get out of that? What would, besides the obvious social issues and environmental issues and things like that? What other benefits are there to a benefit corporation?
What's the benefit to the company versus society? Yeah. So, I mean, I think where benefit corporations, the legislative side of it, really comes into play is it helps you or allows you to keep your mission intact in the case of a buyout. And that's the whole reason that B Corps exist, is because the founders of B Lab owned a company called And1 that were a competitor to Adidas and such. And they got bought out, and when they got bought out, like, the new company came in and basically stripped out all the great social and environmental programs in the name of efficiency, and obviously maximizing shareholder value and stuff. And so they sat and watched their company basically be stripped for parts. So the benefit corporation legislation is meant to keep the mission intact in the event of a sale. I mean, that's really that's the biggest benefit to a company if you're going to do that. The certification has a multitude of benefits. I think, first and foremost, the community is probably the biggest thing. There's over 4,000 B Corps globally. Many of them are digital agencies like Mighty Bytes, but many of them are also clothing manufacturers and just all kinds of different companies in 71 different industries or so. And so it's a really great knowledge base or community that is willing to give and share what they know and share what they learn. And so it's so wonderful knowing that you can have that at your fingertips, and then some of the more kind of short-term tangible things are, people who want to work for purpose-driven organizations are naturally attracted to B Corps. So it makes it easier to find employees. It's easier to find like-minded investors. So if you're looking for, obviously, as we just talked about, investors in a company can really drive where that company goes. And so if you have drawn your line in the sand about what the mission is, it also makes it easier to find investors who share your vision, essentially. So there's just a number of different kinds of benefits. I think, the amount that you get out of being a B Corp is proportional to the amount that you put in. I think as with anything, it's a really great way to run a business. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of stuff to learn and think about and balance and such. But having, B Lab is a great resource and having the community is a great resource. It really feels like a personal safety net for your business, which is really, to me, really wonderful, especially since I'm in a pretty volatile and unstable industry.
Yeah. Well, I definitely have seen what you talk about. I mean, private equity rolls into a company, buys it up, and just, starts selling it for parts. And, you can see the company just falling apart at the seams when that happens and losing sort of all their mojo. But I got to imagine that it also, because another thing we've seen are these sort of, you get activist shareholders who may not have the best interests of society in their mind. And I would imagine this insulates a company from some of those lawsuits as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. I think the best example of that that I can think of is I was at the B Corp Champions Retreat, which is the kind of annual gathering of B Corps. This was several years ago, and it was in Portland, and it was shortly after Amazon bought Whole Foods. And John Mackey of Whole Foods had been kind of, publicly critical of B Corps and saying that I don't know why you need all of that kind of regulation and all that kind of, all those standards and all that kind of stuff, and not long after those statements, Amazon bought him out. And so he came and addressed the B Corp community. And one of the first things out of his mouth was like, hey, if I had become a B Corp, this would have never happened. Like, this is the way that the activist shareholders came in and essentially backed me into a corner and forced me to sell to Amazon. I'm glad I did. And he gave all the reasons for why he thinks it's a good idea. However, he was saying that had he been a B Corp, there would have been the structure in place for him to have to push back on a lot of things that he just didn't have a lot of control over. And so that's, to me, is the biggest, most high profile example. But I think that plays out, that kind of stuff plays out, in investor circles and mergers and acquisitions all the time.
Yeah, and I think it would have been interesting, given, Amazon's track record in history that keeps coming out seemingly almost on a daily basis about sort of, difficult working conditions and things like that.
Okay.
It would have been interesting. I mean, I think still Whole Foods still does operate a little bit independently in some regards from the overall Amazon behemoth, but it would have been interesting and how that would have played into it all working out for them. I would imagine, in an acquisition like that, it wouldn't require necessarily that Amazon in total become a B Corp, but they could have maintained that division as a B Corp. Is that
right?
Correct? How it would work?
Yeah, for sure. And that's there's examples of that in other areas, like Unilever purposefully searches out and invests in B Corps, and they have a lot of their brands are B Corps, especially popular in like consumer brands and stuff. There's a lot of large companies that purchase B Corps and allow them to kind of act autonomously, and Ben and Jerry's as a owned company by Unilever, has been able to maintain their B Corp status, maintain their mission, really do everything that they were doing prior to owning Unilever, but now they have the Unilever name and financial backing behind them.
Yeah, well, and they're so outspoken. I got to imagine, had they been just a regular C Corp, public C Corp, they would have taken a lot of hits, right? It
would have been tough. Yeah, I would think. Yeah, for sure.
But I think the other interesting part of what you're talking about is the flip side of that, right? Because I can imagine, a large enterprise, one of the Fortune 500 being like, oh my God, it'd be really complicated for us to, become a B Corp. Yep. But that doesn't mean that, certain divisions or, even regions can be rolled out as B Corps, to get some of that benefit, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure. And Danone, the big yogurt maker and the brand, big company, they made their North American subsidiary a B Corp, and their goal was to get the entire company globally to be a B Corp by 2025. And there's a whole movement within B Lab, or whole kind of separate initiative within B Lab, specifically to focus on multinationals. And honestly, I don't feel like I could speak to that comfortably, because I'm a small business owner and I mostly deal with small businesses and organizations. So, however, I do know that, B Lab has a specific set of a team basically focused on helping large multinationals navigate these waters, and doing so in a more purpose-driven way that's accountable and transparent and adheres to the values that B Corps do.
So when you mentioned the difference between sort of the B Corp and a benefits company, right?
Yep.
And one thing that also to note about all that is it's not at the federal level that this is happening. It's sort of individually state level things. Yep. And I think, as I said in the introductions, there's 38 states, including District of Columbia, who have enacted legislation to do this. So how does that all work? I mean, are you just incorporated in you have to be incorporated in, I mean, because so many corporations are incorporated in Delaware, right?
Right.
Because of the tax and, assorted benefits of that.
And Delaware also has benefit corporation legislation, so you could do both. You could be a C Corp and a benefit corporation in Delaware.
So would you have to spin that unit out as a separate corporate entity? Is that how that would work, or? Because you also made the distinction between the B Corps, just, adhering to the principles of a B Corp.
Right.
Versus
so let's talk about a little bit about benefit corporations and kind of, I talked about how they're structured. The real main difference for a benefit corporation is that, they make this public claim. The accountability angle on it is that they have to produce a benefit report by law every year. So each state that passed this legislation requires its benefit corporations to produce an impact report of some sort, just basically describing what their benefit to society was. And that's kind of common to the benefit corporations. Certified B Corps, use the B Corp, the B impact assessment, which is, hundreds of questions and really digs deep into, how your company impacts all stakeholders. It is not, legally binding. It's rigorous, and it's certainly, it's third party verified. So it's an optional and voluntary thing for companies like Mighty Bites. As a benefit corporation, we use the B impact assessment to validate, our benefit to society. And so when we produce our benefit reports every year, we just essentially go into our B impact assessment account and we look at the things that we've improved over the course of the last year, and we create a report and put it on our website. And that in Illinois, that has to be on the website by May 1st of the following year or so. But there's no, I think the thing what would give this law teeth would be if that is a requirement, but there's no kind of follow through. Like the Secretary of State isn't coming and hunting you down if you haven't put your benefit report there. And I think the other part of that is that, like, long term, these companies should get benefits given the benefits that they're giving. So like the city of Chicago, for instance, has a preferred vendor designation for B Corps. So in other words, as in a number of different, kinds of small businesses can go out for contracts with the city of Chicago, B Corps are now included in that list, and stuff. And so, it would be great to see that happening in more and more places, because these companies are really bending over backwards to, balance purpose and profit alongside one another. And so it would be, anything that could help those kinds of companies thrive and succeed for the long term is going to be better for society overall.
Since this is all done by state, are there any states that provide any like tax benefits or anything like that?
I don't know for sure. Someone from the policy team at B-Lab would be able to answer that. I know. I think the city of San Francisco had a similar designation to the city of Chicago. I think there's a number of those around the United States and Canada. Uh-huh. I don't know if there's specific tax benefits associated with those at all. I'm not really sure.
It seemed like that'd be an interesting way to, like put some more teeth in it. Because if you're giving a tax benefit, then I think that would incentivize the state to actually patrol it a little tighter.
Yeah, although I will say you probably wouldn't have gotten it passed in 38 states. I was part of I was there and watching the process happen in Illinois, and watching some of the conversations that were happening at the legislative level. And, there was big pushback from the right on making sure that there were no benefits to the benefit corporation legislation, and so, that's I think that passing it first without teeth, so to speak, was a good idea, because you could get the legislation passed, in a majority of states in the U.S. And provinces in Canada. However, I think, going back now and giving those laws teeth is a good thing to do, especially as we look at 2021 and all the things that we've been through with climate change and COVID. And there's a very valid reason why, stakeholder driven business should be the norm and not the exception.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that we talk about a lot on the podcast is that, you look at sort of the younger generation and, everybody's talking about the Great Resignation and all this and, so much of that, being, a lot of it being obviously, choosing, lifestyle, yep. And things like that. But, I think so many people want to be purpose-driven these days, or certainly the younger generation. I mean, I feel that way myself, but I mean, I think, having that purpose-driven nature underneath you is really attractive. So I got to imagine that, down the road, as we look to what this generation is going to be looking for in terms of employment, that could be a really substantial benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. That'll definitely, and we've already seen it. There's a hiring platform called B-Work, for the B Corp community that is specifically for people looking to work at B Corps. And we've already seen that. And I think, since we've started using that, the caliber of people applying for jobs at Mighty Bites has been greatly improved, because they're people who care and want to work at a company that's striving to make a difference. We don't always nail it as a company. But the reality is that we're trying every day, and we're trying to use our resources in the best way possible.
You've seen a lot of B Corps, and you've consulted with a lot of B Corps, and you've talked to a lot of people, and you're part of this broader organization. I got to imagine you've seen some really interesting success stories out there with companies who've gone that route.
Yeah, I mean, every single B Corp has its own unique success story. I think that the thing that makes the B Impact Assessment such a great tool is because it is so expansive in its scope, and they're changing it, to be more inclusive and to do more things. And so it'll continue to be that. It really touches on all the things that you do as a business, or many of them. And so, you can choose where you want to focus. You only have, companies only have a finite amount of resources, even the big ones. And so, if equity, diversity, and inclusion is your company priority, there are things that you can do within the B Corp assessment to improve that. If your jam is the environment and you really want to align all of your business practices with good environmental practices, there are things in the B Corp assessment that can do that. And so I think the companies that have the most interesting stories are the ones that know that, and make decisions accordingly based on where they think they could make a better, stronger impact. So I use the example of Method, the cleaning products company, who unfortunately is no longer a B Corp. They got bought by SC Johnson, and maximizing shareholder value happened. However, when they were, they always scored pretty well in the environmental category. But they when they were looking to get their own manufacturing plant, they were starting to scope out places around the United States where they could put that plant, and they very purposefully, using the B impact assessment, from what I understand, wanted to say, all right, great, because we score well in the environmental category, obviously, I think when it actually finally opened its plant, manufacturing plant, its first manufacturing plant, which I believe was the first LEED Platinum soap manufacturing facility in the world, maybe in the United States for sure. That's where LEED is, I guess. So that would be US. But they chose Pullman because they knew that it was a community that they could create a positive social impact. And so they made a commitment to hire from the community and really make a difference within that community. And so they were, in making those decisions, were able to, balance out their social and environmental impact, because they were already focused on some of the more environmental elements of the B impact assessment. So that's one example, but I think every company has an example of that. For us, we started learning about the environmental impact of the internet shortly after becoming a B Corp, and we're like, well, that's the thing that we build for a living, and so how can we build the leanest, greenest, cleanest websites possible for our clients? And so we went on a whole journey to figure all of that out over years, and we are still evolving those practices and such. So I think every company has a story like that, and all those stories are very interesting, and very compelling, and obviously that we all create collective impact around that.
Well, and it's interesting because I know that, back in the days when I was working on the data center side of things, that, one of the big things that companies were looking for was, just green initiatives, right? And reporting on, what you're doing on that front. And, when I think of B Corps, the B Corp versus benefit corporation, side of the thing, the certification piece. That strikes me when we talk about, compliance and regulatory requirements that all companies have. And we have, like PCI, and you have a set of controls that you have to, work towards to get PCI certification. This just seems like another, compliance, component in some regards, but focused, on sort of the social benefit instead, and sort of adopting a set of controls into your broader, compliance initiatives and efforts could yield good results. Because you do have to, so many times for companies, produce a report on compliance, and here are the controls that we use and how we adhere to them. But like having the ability to say, here's what we do on the environmental side, or here's what we do on diversity, equity, inclusion side. I could see that having huge benefit, going into a deal.
Oh, for sure. And I think that there's room, obviously, for legislative change, because compliance to me means adhering to the law, and there are really not great laws around this kind of stuff yet, and there needs to be. And I think that if we're going to address some of these big wicked problems, like inequity and climate change and stuff, it's inevitable that some sort of legislative change needs to happen. And I appreciate that B Corps aren't afraid of that, and that they're willing to roll, lobbying and working to create change, legislatively, as well as just within their own businesses, as kind of part of the equation, which to me is very inspiring, because that's really where the long-term stuff happens.
Right, right. So I got a company right now, like what would be my first step to becoming a B Corp?
So I think whether you want to become a B Corp or not, the best thing to do is go to bimpactassessment.net and create an account. It's free, and you can use the assessment for your own organization. And then if you decide you want to become a B Corp, awesome, that's great. We need more in the community. However, you don't have to. I mean, really, if you want to set a baseline of where your impact is on people and planet, that's a great tool to do it. And it's free, and anybody can use it. And so I would say that's the first step to go there. That'll, give yourself a few hours to go through and answer some of the questions. You'll probably get a little glazed over and realize that, these are some big questions, and I need to, do some due diligence to get the answers. And that's okay. Many companies take, months upon months to go through the assessment process and stuff. But you got to start somewhere, right? And using the B Impact assessment, which is free, is probably the best first step, Right. And there's if you want to, before even doing that, if you want to learn about what other B Corps are doing, there's a blog, Be the Change, letter B, thechange.com, which is a Medium publication. That's the storytelling platform. Say that 5 times really fast. Of the B Corp community, the storytelling platform of the B Corp community, where, B Corps tell their stories of how they are balancing purpose and profit, how they're creating change, et cetera. And there's always, every week, there's new stories from companies. So when I was talking earlier about, every B Corp has their own story, that's a place to go read them and read up on what's possible.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned a few things here, so I'll make sure to include links in the description below to all these organizations and websites that you're talking about. Are there specific law firms that handle B corporations? I mean, is there a set of resources beyond just sort of the initial, like how to do it and how to think about it?
Right. Bcorporation.net has all kinds of resources for all kinds of organizations, because they're a global organization. Many of the resources are kind of broad. There is going to be very soon a separate B-Lab US and Canada website for those of us in the US and Canada. So there are subsidiary organizations or B-Lab offices essentially all over the world. And so US and Canada is the kind of one that was started. It started in Philly or the Philly area, and then B-Lab Global kind of spun off from that. So that will be some US and Canada specific resources. Then the Be Local groups I mentioned, and I can share a link to that as well.
Excellent.
That people want to connect with people near them. There's a whole page on the B-Lab website of all the chapters and where they are and that kind of thing. And they all have their individual websites. So ours is IllinoisBcorps.org. And we have a listing of all the companies there, what we're working on, and that kind of thing. And you can always reach out to any of those organizations to make a local connection.
Tim, did you say that globally there's 4,000 certified B Corps? Is that the number?
Yeah, 4,000 plus. I think at this point it's kind of been gradually going up. Since COVID, there's been an explosion in companies wanting to become B Corps, which has created a huge bottleneck for B-Lab, because they're a relatively small organization in this grander scheme of things. And so certifying B Corps is a long, process anyway. And so there are 4,000, but there could be, 14,000 by this time next year. Who knows? The interest has been great. That's for sure.
So of those 4,000 in the growth, what are the most common types of B Corps that you're seeing? And also, do you have a sense of, is there a gap in the market for a need for a certain type of a B Corp?
I think that on B-Lab's website, last time I checked, it was 71 different industries, or maybe 71 countries. It's on bcorporation.net.
Okay.
It's if you go, like, there's a home banner, and then right underneath it, it says like X number of companies, X number of industries, X number of countries, et cetera. I know that the last I checked, there was 4,000 plus, and I'm pretty sure 71 industries, but I'm not sure 100%. But in terms of like whether there's a gap in industries, B Corps come in all shapes and sizes. I mean, Danone North America is the largest one currently that I know of. In Illinois, we have KeHE, which is a food distribution, a natural foods distribution company, which is the second largest in the U.S. or in North America. But then, there's tons and tons of B Corps that are one-person consultancies or small agencies like mine. There's a lot of agencies and stuff in the community. So there's pretty much a guarantee, regardless of the industry that you're in, that you'll be able to find other companies within your industry that will be willing and interested in sharing best practices. And there's a whole closed B Corp social network called the Beehive, which has all kinds of affinity groups specific to LGBTQ plus information, specific to marketing information, specific to locale, specific to like all kinds of different separate groups. So if you go into the Beehive looking for a specific kind of topic or interest group, there's probably a group there that's already been established and is focusing on some of the issues that you're looking to solve.
Yeah. I'm on the B Corp website now. I see it.
So
it's amazing.
So the numbers are 4,088 companies, 153 industries, 77 countries, and one unifying goal, they say.
All right. That's I stand corrected. That's actually much. I appreciate it. It's much better than I was thinking.
Yeah, it seems like they're getting through that list, that backlog a little bit, and getting some new ones
There's
out
a lot of different ideas, right? What that tells me is there's just a lot of different ideas coming out.
It is to me, it's a really, like, the whole impact assessment concept is a really good creativity kit for business. I mean, it's just, it's not only is it like having a sustainable MBA in a can, so to speak, but it's just really like, the gold standard for most B Corps is to have an impact business model. It's one thing to say, here's my company, and like, we're a 1% for the planet member, so we give 1% of our top line sales to environmental nonprofits every year. That's nice, and I'm glad that we do it, and I'm proud of that work and everything. However, the gold standard is figuring out, how do you make money and help people at the same time? Instead of like the kind of old school traditional philanthropist model where you're cutting a check out of your profits every year, how do you actually help people and be a profitable company in tandem, and so that your product or your service actually, creates a positive social or environmental impact. And that, to me, was where so much opportunity for innovation and creativity and really, kind of where the explosion of purpose-driven business in the next 20 years could be,
Yeah, that's definitely exciting. I did want to ask you about one other thing, too. One of the things I saw, now switching from the B Corp to the benefits corporation side of things, one of the things I did see, and I don't know if this applies to all states, but it does apply to some states, I understand, is that you can craft your incorporation in a way that it's not reversible. Is that correct? So that if you do get bought, they have to continue with that standard, right?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding of the benefit corporation legislation is that is the purpose. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to dispel advice that
but you play one on TV
the wrong way. But I play one on TV, yeah. So I really don't know that I can speak to that, other than to say that, like I said, that the purpose of the benefit corporation legislation is to keep that mission intact in whether it's a buyout or a change of ownership or whatever it is. The purpose is to keep the purpose, and make sure that stays intact no matter what.
Well, and considering that this is in 77 different countries, I mean, that's a lot of legislation. And it's got to be a hodgepodge of all sorts of stuff, because we got, the states here and 77 countries.
Yeah, again, I think here's where some confusion lies, because I think that 77 countries is where there are certified B Corps. So I don't know that I know that there is benefit corporation legislation or similar passing, I believe, in the UK and maybe Italy, and I mean, there's definitely action happening there and legislative change going on there. But in terms of being able to track that and put numbers to it, I couldn't speak to that.
Yeah, I got to imagine that's an interesting project.
Yeah, well, I know a few people on the policy team at B Lab, and they're always a little eyes the size of dinner plates because they've got a lot going on.
Yeah, I would imagine. A
little shell shocked.
Yeah, that's got to be incredibly challenging. I mean, I've dealt with having to just install networks and telco in various countries, and just how insane that regulatory mishmash gets. It's. I can't imagine trying to put forth all that legislation and lobbying for that. So tell me, okay, you guys are B Corp, you're doing well. What's next for Mighty Bites and Be Local Illinois?
Be Local Illinois. We'll go with that one first because it's a relatively short story. I mean, we're going to continue to grow the number of B Corps in the state of Illinois. I actually am now chair emeritus. I stepped down after 8 or 9 years as of January. We have a brand new board in place, and they're awesome, and they're doing really amazing work and doing a lot of stuff that when we were a smaller group and sometimes only me, that I just couldn't get to. I have a day job already. So figuring out how to welcome B Corps on board to Illinois and make sure that you're facilitating strong introductions and just growing a thriving community. We have more people now to help with that and stuff. And we became a program of social good funds. So we're able to receive donations now. And there's a lot happening there with Illinois B Corps and Be Local Illinois. The goal, again, is to grow the community and create collective impact.
And I'll put a link down below for how to get in touch with you guys, how to join, your organization, and maybe how to donate even, right?
In terms of Mighty Bites, as I mentioned earlier, we use the B Impact Assessment to kind of retool how we design and build websites. That has been kind of our bread and butter over the last 15, 20 years or so. And so we decided to run that through a sustainability lens in 2011. In 2013, we created a tool called EcoGrader, which was really meant to help people understand the environmental impact of their websites and stuff. But now we're really starting to look more at kind of a much more holistic, broader social and environmental take on digital. Mm-hmm. And so there's this kind of burgeoning corporate digital responsibility movement. So, there's a CSR, the social responsibility team at a lot of large organizations. There have been calls for an 18th SDG, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, that is specifically focused on digital. I don't need to tell you that there have been all kinds of crazy social and environmental things that have been going on with tech in the last 5 years, especially.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so wrapping our heads around what we as company leaders can do to facilitate the responsible, ethical, and sustainable use of technology within our organizations is something that I'm very interested in, and making sure that the word gets out about that kind of stuff, because I think that there are sets of practices that organizations have adopted and have shown to be successful. But it's also very emerging, and a lot of organizations, especially the ones that we work with, which are like nonprofits and kind of smaller social enterprises and other B Corps and stuff, don't often have the resources or don't have the capacity to do a lot of this stuff. So we see that as an opportunity to help them.
That's awesome. And I just want to say, thanks so much for coming on. And I thank you for your, LinkedIn posts over the years. That's kind of where I found out about B Corps, many, many years ago. And, I used to live in Andersonville back when you guys kind of first started out over there. And, so I remember you guys from back in the, .com boom era days and things like that. So, I'm glad to see you're still around and kicking, because it's been a tough industry to be in for a while.
It sure has. That is an understatement. Although I will say honestly that since becoming a B Corp, that's been really a kind of driving force in kind of all that we do. It's been a really I think had I just stuck with I want to do design and technology for a living, I would have gotten disillusioned far earlier than I did. And this has really given us a great purpose to run our organization and run, like I said, run responsible, ethical, and sustainable digital practices.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I, again, really appreciate the conversation. I'm glad that we can get the message out. Thanks for being a spokesperson. I know you do TEDx talks and things like that. So we'll put more, this will be a whole lot of links in the description, I think, for a lot of
Awesome.
different things. So, but thanks so much for coming on, and I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. We appreciate the conversation. This has been great.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you like what you saw, please think about subscribing and giving us a like, and I will see you in the next video.